Thursday, October 14th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Week 6 Preview Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Small. And Jared, we got Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday night for the first game this week. The Bucs are 7-point road favorites, an over-under of 52. And I guess we'll start at Rob Gronkowski being out for a third straight game with the rib injury and an assortment of internal injuries. So when I wrote the Shark Bite yesterday for him being officially ruled out, I said Cameron Brate will remain the top receiving option at the position for the Bucs, but that wasn't necessarily the case in Week 5.
That's right. I mean, O.J. Howard out-targeted Brate 3-1, and their routes were close, which wasn't the case in Week 4 when Gronk was out. Brate still ran more routes, but it was 47% for Cameron Brate, 42% for O.J. Howard. So, I mean, they're both still decent touchdown bets, I guess, when you get down to that territory. But, neither guy is a safe fantasy play tonight.
Yeah, in Week 4, we saw 33 routes for Brate versus 16 for O.J. Howard. Last week, it was 21-19, so Howard didn't really come up. It was more Brate going down. Howard's playing time has been steady, 65%, 59% in those two games. Brate, 64-38. So I think the end result here is don't really trust either to a strong degree. Certainly either one could do something because that's just the way the position is right now. But I wouldn't reach for either one, especially coming off a 1-target Cameron Brate game and a 3-target O.J. Howard game as the more active tight end in the passing game. You're not looking ahead. You're not looking forward to using either of these tight ends, right?
No, I think they're just like DFS showdown plays. Howard's kind of intriguing if we're talking that, because I do still think he's a really big talent. I remember he's coming off the Achilles injury from last season, so it might make sense that his role is going to grow a bit as we get, as he puts that injury further behind him.
It's worth noting, too, that these Eagles have been solid in pass coverage overall, but they're pretty weak at linebacker. So that could be an area that the Bucs try to exploit in this game tonight.
Yeah, well, they're third in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Kind of surprising. They're 10th against tight ends. So yeah, could be a bit more action to the tight ends this week.
At wide receiver, Mike Evans and Antonio Brown each topped 100 yards and scored twice last week against the Dolphins. It was Chris Godwin, though, beating each of those guys by 3 targets, 11-8. I think the takeaway there is any of these 3 guys is a solid to good play.
Yeah, but as we've been saying all year, I think, you're probably going to get one of these guys who disappoints you every week. But they both have the upside. We just saw Evans and Brown show last week. So I'd be trying to start all 3 of these guys tonight in, what should be a high-scoring game.
Yeah, and if the disappointing guy's getting 11 targets, try not to be too disappointed. Leonard Fournette has taken over the backfield the past 2 weeks. 25 opportunities 2 weeks ago to Ronald Jones' 6 with Gio Bernard out. Gio Bernard returned last week for Week 5. 17 opportunities still for Fournette, 6 apiece for Gio Bernard and Ronald Jones. So he still had more opportunities, meaning carries plus targets, than Gio and Ronald Jones combined. Gio had the touchdown catch, but Fournette still even led there with 5 targets versus 3 combined for Gio Bernard and Ronald Jones.
Yeah, that was great to see Fournette keep so much passing game work. Like you said, the 5 targets, he ran her out on 64% of the pass plays, which is a strong number. He was 12th in expected fantasy points among running backs last week with Bernard back. So I think at this point, Fournette is like an every week RB2, and there's obviously big touchdown upside if Brady lets Fournette get those touchdowns. Brady's trying to break records this season, but Fournette should get a few every once in a while.
I'll say again, I wish I had trusted the Draft Sharks rankings preseason a little bit more on Fournette. Yeah. Speaking of Tom Brady, we talked a little bit about this last season, but I want to go back to Sleepy Brady in the primetime games. So we talked about it last year where they had 5 primetime games. They had Chicago, they were at the Giants, they were home for the Saints, home for the Rams, and then the wild card game against Washington. And Tom Brady was just not as good in those 5 games. Now, I'm not saying it's because it was at night. I'm not saying it's a large enough sample to tell us something, but he was just under 18 fantasy points per game in those 5 primetime games, counting regular season and playoffs. His other 15 games, he was 26.9 points per game. So there was a difference. I can't say it's because he was playing at night, but there was a difference between them. And we spin that ahead to this year. He's had 4 awesome games and 1 not awesome game so far. The 4 awesome games have not been primetime. The 1 not awesome game was primetime against New England. And don't tell me it was the matchup with the Patriots, because after that, they let Davis Mills throw for 312 and 3 touchdowns.
Well, week 1 was a primetime game. Remember, it was the Thursday nighter.
That's right.
Yeah. yeah. Your whole narrative is shattered here. Brady went 379 and 4 touchdowns in that game against the Cowboys. I mean, it's one big primetime game out of a bunch.
He had his whole summer to get rested up for that primetime game. It's when you get into the regular season, that's when he's sleepy Brady.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, to me, the bigger concern, and it's not even a big concern, but is the right thumb injury that Brady's going to be playing through tonight. Full practice on Friday, not even listed on the injury report. And the Bucs implied total has not moved. It's still at like 29.75. So no one in Vegas is concerned. I'm not concerned. I'm still starting Brady. We'll see how sleepy he is tonight.
Yeah, I will say that I'm not overly concerned about it. If I happen to be sitting there with Brady and Matthew Stafford or Justin Herbert and maybe even Dak Prescott, I might start one of those guys over him especially with the right thumb thing and the short week. I mean, the guy is 44. It's a short week. It's a road game. It's prime time. There are plenty of factors that could have him just be something less than Tom Brady, not to mention what we mentioned about the Eagles being solid in pass coverage. They're 10th in pass defense DVOA right now. High variance. They've been excellent in a couple of games and terrible in another and weak in 2 others. So it's a high variance defense. But, there are enough factors where it's like if Tom Brady is just okay tonight, it wouldn't be shocking.
Yeah, Herbert I could definitely see playing over Brady if he wanted to. Stafford I wouldn't do. It's not crazy. I would play Jalen Hurts on the other side of this game over Tom Brady tonight.
Yes, I would definitely do that as well. And moving over to the Philly side of that, Jalen Hurts, I think, is a must start everywhere. I mean, he's just delivered every single week, even in rough passing outings. Now we get the Bucs defense that's been missing 2 corners, is missing Carlton Davis for the second straight game now, is missing Antoine Winfield for the second straight game at safety. Now they're also missing Levante David, who is the best linebacker in coverage for the Bucs. So it's a positive passing matchup.
Yeah, Hurts has still not finished worse than quarterback 11 in fantasy points in any of his career starts. I think he's up to like 8 starts now. And the Bucs, we obviously love this matchup. Teams are easily passing at the highest rate in neutral situations against the Bucs. It's 74% against the Bucs and like 60% against the second highest team. The Eagles too, by the way, they're 7th in situation neutral pass rate. So they've been a pass leaning offense. So you're going to get like 50 dropbacks out of Hurts tonight. That might be 40 pass attempts and 7 or 8 runs. You're going to get big volume out of him tonight.
Yeah, I think Jalen Hurts is also the biggest must include in showdown lineups tonight.
Yeah.
In addition to Hurts, I think the matchup helps Zach Ertz. Dallas Goedert is almost definitely out because he's on the COVID list. I mean, I guess maybe we'll see today if there's some news, but I haven't seen any indication that Dallas Goedert might play in this game. Zach Ertz, even with Dallas Goedert on the field, has beaten Goedert by 3 targets in 3 straight games.
Yep, Ertz averaging 5 targets per game this season, and Goddard's averaging 3.8. So you figure Ertz picks up a few of Goddard's targets. He's a good volume bet tonight, and the matchup's good, like you mentioned.
Devontae Smith's also usable here for sure, and there's upside to the matchup for him.
I think Smith's going to have a big game tonight, and he's had a couple big games already. I think this might be his biggest. I think it might be kind of a coming out party on national TV for Devonta. But he's 34th in PPR points right now, but he's 22nd in expected points. So he's underachieved his usage so far. And again, pass volume should be up for Philly, and it's a good individual matchup for Smith too.
He's lost a couple of touchdowns this season to penalties already. Matchup could be good for Kenneth Gainwell also if the Bucs do jump out to a lead the way the Vegas line says that it will. But so why that is because we've seen him be the 2-minute back for them, and we've seen him be involved in all areas. Now, that said, the Eagles were chasing a bit in the fourth quarter last week against Carolina. They were trailing, trying to go down to score the game-winning touchdown. Miles Sanders was in the backfield for that stuff, and then was in the backfield again when they were trying to kill the clock at the end. So it's not necessarily Kenneth Gainwell if they fall behind, but there's a chance that it could be positive game script, for teams out there that are struggling at running back. And I know that there are plenty of those this week.
Yes. Sanders actually set season highs last week in snap rate and route rate. Tough matchup. I don't expect a big game from Miles Sanders tonight, but he might be a buy low after tonight's game if he struggles, just because that usage we saw last week. But we'll see. In the 2 games Philly has lost by double-digit points this season, Gainwell has 4 and 8 targets in those 2 games. So if you get something like 4, 5, 6 targets tonight, he could be a decent bye week option for PPR leagues.
If you start Miles Sanders, though, don't watch the game because you're going to see Jalen Hurts put the ball in his belly and then take it away and run for the touchdown himself at some point.
Yeah, exactly. The one interesting thing about the Bucs is in previous years, they've been good both in run defense, which they obviously still are this season, but also in running back coverage in the passing game. That's not the case this season. Football Outsiders has them 25th in running back coverage. And we obviously just saw Myles Gaskin have the big game in the passing game last week versus them. So there's definitely opportunity for Sanders and Gainwell to, put up some points in the passing game tonight.
And that came in the game that Levante David left early. And like I said, he's the best linebacker in coverage for them. So that can only help the matchup for running back receiving on the Philly side. So some upside, certainly not an attractive matchup overall, but some upside for the receiving.
Yep.
Miami Dolphins against the Jacksonville Jaguars in London, 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. The Dolphins are 3.5-point favorites, over under of 45.5. Honestly, Jared, this is a game where I would rather not play guys if it's a close decision between two players for my fantasy lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think not playing Dolphins in general. I guess besides Mike Gesicki, I do still think he's a good play. Just the usage he's getting. Even last week was like a floor game, but he didn't kill you with 4 catches, whatever he had. I think Myles Gaskin was the big story of last week. I don't fully trust it still. I think it was definitely game plan. Miami had the right game plan of going pass heavy against the Bucs and using someone like Gaskin in the passing game. But he's definitely their pass catching back. But Gaskin also is only averaging 6.8 carries per game. So he's almost like down there in like kind of Gainwell territory where you're just kind of hoping he does it in the passing game.
Yeah, he's their top receiving back, but he's also only seen 65% of their running back targets on the season. So it's not like he's dominating in that area. 5.2 targets per game, even with the 10 from last week worked into that number. So no lock in any format. I definitely would not trust last week's game as something to, use in projecting forward. But, I guess it tells you at least that if they throw the ball a lot, he'll be involved. It also followed a season low 23% snap share for Myles Gaskin the week before against the Colts. So, there's upside. He's a decent option, but definitely not a safe play.
Yeah, it definitely looks like a matchup based backfield. And again, Brian Flores comes from New England. That's kind of what New England does. So it's going to be tough to predict on a weekly basis.
Yeah, that New England means that the second you think you know what's coming, something else is coming the next week. Mike Gesicki, I agree with. He disappointed us last week if we were looking for upside, but at this point, I will take 4 catches for 43 yards as a bad week at tight end. And then wide receivers, it's a positive matchup against Jacksonville, but Jalen Waddle is our highest ranked Dolphins wideout at number 43 in PPR. He's got that 13 target, 12 catch week 3 that stands out if you look at his game log. But overall for the season, actually outside of that game, he's averaging just 5.75 targets and 3.75 receptions per contest.
Yeah, Miami just continues to use him almost exclusively near the line of scrimmage, which is it's okay if half his targets are coming there, but he needs to get downfield more. Devontae Parker is still sidelined on Wednesday with his hamstring injury, so that would help Waddle a bit if Parker was out. But Parker was out last week and Waddle still did nothing. It does seem like Tua is gonna be back for Miami this week, which you wouldn't use him in fantasy, but I do still think he's an upgrade for the offense over Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, Parker now also listed with a shoulder, by the way, so we'll see about his status. And Tua, you'd like to think that it helps Waddle and everybody else at receiver going forward, but it's also tough to say what that impact is going to be first game back. So, altogether, it's a situation I would rather avoid if possible. On the Jacksonville side, James Robinson's basically an every week start at this point. Congrats if you're good enough at running back where you can sit James Robinson. I think the way to look at the situation overall is Devontae Booker this week looks like Jesus to people on the waiver wire. They think that he's coming to save your lineup. Either that or he's Mumra from Thundercats, where he's rising from the dead, but he has evil in mind.
Yeah, you lost me on Thundercats there, but yeah, I agree. It's a shaky week at running back as usual. The Jags, by the way, they are second in Football Outsiders rushing DVOA, as a team. They're the second best rushing team in the NFL according to Football Outsiders. So, and James Robinson's playing well. He's getting the volume. Miami's 32nd in adjusted points allowed to running back. So it's a great spot for Robinson.
The whole Jaguars passing game, though, let us down in a positive matchup with Tennessee last week. Marvin Jones, I think, is back to being the top bet. He only had 1 catch against the Titans, but he had 6 targets. That was 3rd on the team, however, behind Dan Arnold and Jamal Agnew. I guess let's start with positive on Dan Arnold, because it was only his 2nd game with the team, and the first one came just a few days after being traded there. He played more snaps last week than the other 3 Jaguars tight ends combined. And through 2 games, Dan Arnold has seen 17.5% target share.
Yeah, 24% target share last week, as you mentioned, team high 8 targets, and ran a passer on 74% of the dropbacks, which is a really strong number. Caught 6 balls, 64 yards. Miami, a middling matchup for tight end. So Arnold has already worked his way into, like, if you don't have one of the top 7 or 8 guys, like, he's a guy you can consider for fantasy lineups this week.
There's definitely room for Dan Arnold to be Jacksonville's Mike Gesicki going forward. Back to the wideouts, though. I mean, Marvin Jones, like I said, top option. We're talking like low wide receiver 2 to high wide receiver 3 territory. Laviska Shenault is now an outside receiver, apparently. He got 3 targets last week, 1 long catch, and is not playing in the slot anymore.
Right. So he played 83% of his snaps in the slot the first 4 games. That was down to 13% in week 5, which you might think that's a good thing. Like, he's going to be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, but it looks like he was only on the field in 3 wide receiver sets as an outside receiver because his route rate was down. He ran a route with just 65% of the pass plays. That was down from 79% in the first 4 weeks. So I don't know what's going on with Shenault, why Tavon Austin and Jamal Agnew are seeing more targets. But, and man, the one catch Shenault made was like 15 yards on field, and they broke like 6 tackles to pick up like an extra 40 yards after the catch. So he still looks awesome, but the usage, kind of means we can't trust him in fantasy lineups right now.
Jared, when you have Jamal Agnew, you got to get him on the field. That's what's happening in Jacksonville. He played 63% of the snaps as the number 3 wide receiver for the Jaguars last week, ran 1 more pass route than Laviska Shenault. He operated as the primary slot receiver. He had only played 28 offensive snaps through 4 games. So I mean, we'll see what happens in week 6, but I think at the moment you have to treat Jamal Agnew as the top slot receiver. And that's especially because Tavon Austin in his 2 games has spent just 23% of his snaps in the slot.
I can't believe we're talking about Jamal Agnew and Tavon Austin. We said this all summer that Urban Meyer was going to mess up this Jaguars offense, and it's happening.
And I think I'm only aware of it because in our Going Deep league with Mike Clay, you have to start 6 receivers. Yep. At first, I picked up Tavon Austin as just somebody to be my 6th receiver with Cordero Patterson on bye. And then I was looking at the playing time numbers, and I was like, wait a second, Jamal Agnew is the slot man. It's not Tavon Austin. Bye, Tavon Austin. I guess I'm starting Jamal Agnew this week.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for making us have to dig deep into these Jags wideouts.
That's right. There's nothing else we need to talk about in that game, right?
No.
Cincinnati at Detroit, starting the regular Sunday slate. Bengals by 3 points on the road, over under 47.5. T. Higgins returned from his shoulder injury last week. Jamar Chase still drew a season-high 10 targets, 3 ahead of T. Higgins for that game, who got 7 to rank 2nd on the team. Tyler Boyd fell, tied Samaje Perine for 3rd on the team with just 5. I think a bigger story than their target shares, though, might be the Bengals looking like they're leaning a bit further toward the pass now than where they started the season.
Yes, totally agree. They set a season high last week in situation neutral pass rate. They finished 7th on the week in situation neutral pass rate. That was after finishing 10th the previous week. I still think Joe Mixon's injury had something to do with that rate last week, and it might come down a bit if Mixon is healthier for Sunday's game. And it's a game that Cincinnati should be able to control and play with the lead against Detroit. So maybe it comes down a bit. But it's definitely encouraging. It seems like they're opening the offense back up, as Burrow settles in after that knee injury last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Joe Mixon got that limited workload last week, did play, but he didn't get on the field for practice until Saturday. So he started this week with a limited practice. So that's good news for his recovery from the ankle injury. And Samaje Perine's on the COVID list. So as of the moment, we have to assume he's not going to play, and we'll kind of see where that goes.
Yeah, I would plan on getting Mixon back in fantasy lineups this week. Like you said, the fact that he was able to practice on Wednesday tells me he didn't suffer any type of setback with that ankle. So I'm expecting him to be back in the lead role, and it's obviously a good matchup against Detroit.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on the Bengals passing game before we move to the other side?
Nope. I just think Tyler Boyd is going to struggle now as kind of the 3rd guy in this passing. He's only averaging 6 targets in the 3 games that T. Higgins and Jamar Chase have played. So it's going to be tough for him. Yeah,
Boyd's definitely the guy that I would worry about because he needs volume more than the other 2 outside longer range guys. So I agree with that. On the Detroit side, I saw yesterday, being Wednesday, that J.J. Zacharyson tweeted out this table of target share allowed above or below expectations so far by position. And the Bengals have allowed the league's largest over-expected target share to running backs. So this could be a good week for DeAndre Swift against that Bengals team. He's already seen at least 5 targets in every game, leads the Lions in targets, receptions, and receiving yards, and he's seen 17.9% target share for the season.
I was hoping you were going to say running backs for the high rate there against, not wide receivers. But yeah, Swift's volume hasn't really climbed the past couple of weeks, but he has set season highs in snap rates at 73 and then 74%. Jamal Williams is still sort of in there. Is like, and when Jamal's in there, they're going to run. They're going to give him the ball on the ground. But Swift's kind of in there in all the other situations, and he's still producing as an RB1 in PPR.
Yeah. 3 straight bad outings let's say tough outings for TJ Hawkinson. I think it's worth noting a couple of things. One, the Bears and the Vikings the past 2 weeks rank 4th and 6th in pass defense DVOA. They're also tough against tight ends. So maybe it was negative matchups. The Vikings is less tough than the Bears, but tough pass coverage matchups. He just saw 2 targets against the Ravens the week before. Might be more noteworthy, though, that he's dealing with a knee injury. He did not practice Wednesday of this week. He missed Wednesday's practice last week. He was not on the injury report heading into week 4, which is when they faced Baltimore, but then showed up the following week on Wednesday missing practice. So that to me says he hurt that knee in that Baltimore game, and he's been dealing with it since. I don't know how much of a factor it is. He's been near his normal playing time.
Right. His playing time has been there, where it was before the knee injury. His route rates have been there. So, it's not like he's blocking more. He's still out there when the Lions are passing. So I would bet on the production coming back, at least when that knee gets right. And he didn't practice on Wednesday, right, with that knee injury. So I think it's still an issue. We'll see what he does these last 2 days. He's still safely inside our top 10 tight ends for the week. I think you're fine if you have him. I also don't think it's crazy to use like Dalton Schultz or Noah Fant or even like Dawson Knox over Hawkinson, especially until we know that knee is right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it'll be worth watching his practice participation to see if it gets worse versus last week, because that could indicate how much of an issue the knee is. Yep. And frankly, I don't think there's anything else worth talking about with Detroit. I'm ignoring the wideouts completely.
Well, I did want to mention Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially with Quintez Cephas out for the season now, and Tyrell Williams looks like he's still going to be out this week with his concussion. But Amon-Ra has 8 targets in back-to-back games. He's had 6 and then 7 catches. So if you're hurting in a PPR league with bye weeks, I do think he is a low-level option.
I'll give him that. If I had to pick up Jamal Agnew somewhere, that I'm sure somebody needs Amon-Ra St. Brown this week.
Yep.
On to Minnesota at Carolina, Vikings by 1. That opened as a Panthers by 1.5 line. So some significant shift there. 45.5 over under. That's down 2 points from where it opened. On the Minnesota side, Vikings backfield, we got all Alexander Mattison last week, but Wednesday found Dalvin Cook putting in a limited practice and Madison sitting out with a shoulder injury. So we're going to have to watch both of those guys before we know what to do with it Sunday.
Yeah, Jefferson and Thielen sat out too Wednesday, so I think they're just getting some guys some rest early in the week. But yeah, getting out there on Wednesday tells me that Cook is probably back this week, and hopefully he's back and is going to get most of the work, because we've seen whoever is getting that lead back usage in Minnesota, whether it's Cook or Madison, is like a top 5 fantasy option. So and that'll remain the case. I do think if Cook is active, he's probably going to get most of the work.
And with Minnesota now having that slight edge on the road and Carolina being the number 2 pass defense in DVOA, I think it's a good week for Minnesota to plan on running the ball, whoever it is, even if it's both of them, and not an exciting week for Kirk Cousins. I mean, you're obviously playing Justin Jefferson. You're probably playing Adam Thielen, but it's just not a high upside spot for the Vikings passing game.
Yeah, not a good week for Cousins. Not a good week for Tyler Conklin, who he had that big week 3, but he hasn't finished as a top 20 fantasy tight end in any of the other 4 weeks. His usage is okay. The targets are okay. That the route rate is okay. But to me, he's not like a top 12 guy. He's someone you use on bye weeks. I think. I just think he's going to have too many down games in this, lower volume passing game with Jefferson and Thielen as the 2 clear leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially in this matchup that doesn't present a whole lot of upside. Not a week to reach for anything in the Minnesota offense. KJ Osborne, by the way, we've talked about here and there. His playing time settled in around 60% after that opener where he played 81%. And the Vikings are also back in the league's bottom half now in neutral pass rate after opening the season a little bit more pass leaning than what we got used to. So, it might not be a favorable passing offense for, extra opportunity going forward.
Yep, agreed.
On the Panthers side, Sam Darnold coming off easily his worst outing so far this season. So I think the question is, did he remind us that he's Sam Darnold, or did he just have a bad week?
Well, he's actually he's passed poorly in 2 straight weeks now. He saved himself in week 4 with those rushing touchdowns, but PFF had him 27th in passing grade back in week 4, and he was dead last this past week. So it's definitely a concern. And, Minnesota's defense has been, I guess, better than I even realized. Football Outsiders has them 6th in pass defense, and they're 7th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. So, on paper, it's not a great matchup for Darnold. He's right on the edge of the top 12 of our rankings this week.
Yeah, I would like to blame it some on being pressured last week, but Pro Football Focus has Sam Darnold 24th in passer rating in clean pockets, 25th when pressured. So it hasn't really made a whole lot of difference for him. He's faced the 9th highest pressure rate versus dropbacks among all quarterbacks. So, it's high, but not exorbitantly high. The Vikings are kind of middling in applying pressure, but pressure is going to be an option. It's an okay week to use Darnold, not a week to go after him, not a week to totally forget about him.
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey should be back from his hamstring injury. Last week started out optimistically as well, so we'll have to watch. But, it seems like he should be on track this week.
Well, Matt Rule called him 50-50 on Wednesday, and CMC was limited in Wednesday's practice still, so we'll see. Chuba Hubbard had a much, much more productive game and a better game as far as usage in week 5. And, I think it was because, the Panthers lost, but they were playing with the lead for most of that game. So that's what I think it is. When they're playing with leads, Chuba's going to be in there. If not, you're going to see more Rodney Smith.
Mm-hmm. DJ Moore is obvious. Terrace Marshall is an obviously not. And Robbie Anderson is the one that gets a little bit less obvious. He seems like an obviously not because he continues to not deliver for us. It's been 5 weeks now. But it is worth noting that through the first 3 games, he saw 10.3% target share. Then came Matt Rule saying we got to get Robbie Anderson the ball more. Since then, 23.7% target share. So you can say those are the 2 games without Christian McCaffrey. Maybe that was a factor in that. But we're also talking about Christian McCaffrey at a 0.7 ADOT, 15.2 ADOT for Robbie Anderson. So they're not getting the same targets. Maybe a couple of targets go somewhere else, wherever it is on the field with no McCaffrey. But those 2 guys aren't playing the same role. So that's not really a straight trade-off. Maybe McCaffrey, if he comes back, siphons a target or 2. Maybe his presence helps Anderson find space downfield. I think ultimately, Anderson, you can't really like a lot this week. But if you're looking down in wide receiver 40 range, I think he has an easier path to production than most of the other guys down there.
I think that he's going to pop for, a few 2, 3, 4 big games the rest of the way. I don't know when they're going to come. And it is so Anderson's the 4th least efficient wide receiver so far in terms of actual points versus expected points. He's wide receiver 70 in actual fantasy points. He's wide receiver 39 in expected. So he's getting low end wide receiver 3 usage. Anderson has the lowest catchable target rate in the NFL. So he's getting mostly downfield shots, and Sam Darnold is not throwing those accurately. So they'll connect at some point this season, but when they're going to connect, I have no idea.
Yeah, they're not going to be a duo to count on. Don't go say Robbie Anderson's a buy low right now. I'm definitely not saying that because Sam Darnold's been off, and then Robbie Anderson drops some that do come his way. So when you combine them, it's just there's going to be more frustration than not. But at some point, there's going to be a big game. So, if you have that decision where it's at the bottom of the roster, that's a reason to like Robbie Anderson in that kind of situation.
Yep, I'll give him that.
Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Houston at Indianapolis, Colts by 9.5, over under 43.5. Texans have the lowest team total of the week by the Vegas numbers. Clearly, no one is respecting Davis Mills' big game against the Patriots last week, and nobody's buying Chris Moore or Chris Conley or anybody else named Chris for the Texans.
I'm not buying Chris Moore or Chris Conley. I do think Mills' play is good news for Brandon Cooks, though. He played really well. Over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against a Bill Belichick defense, which usually dominates rookie wide receivers. We saw it was Zach Wilson earlier this season. Wilson looked horrible against that defense. PFF had Mills 8th in passing grade last week. So, he's still not an option, but I think it's good news for Brandon Cooks. And I even think Chris Conley and Chris Moore doing something is good news for Brandon Cooks because it's just going to, it gives defenses something else to worry about. So Cooks is still the clear lead guy here, and I like him in this spot. The Colts are 30th in pass defense DVOA. They're much tougher against the run than the pass. So it sets up as a nice spot for Brandon Cooks to get going again.
By the way, Chris Moore was basically the slot replacement for, I don't know, Danny Amendola and whoever else is playing in the slot at this point last week. So we'll see about Amendola's availability. Chris Conley is the better bet to be on the field if you're in the kind of league where you're looking that deep. But I agree, it's Brandon Cooks and it's nobody else here. And even with last week's disappointing line for him, especially with the big numbers around him, he's still sitting on 31.4% target share for the season as Brandon Cooks.
And the Colts are 25th against number one wide receivers, according to Football Outsiders, and Xavier Rhodes might miss this game with his concussion.
It seems like every time I look at a Colts game this season, I'm watching Xavier Rhodes make his way slowly off the field.
It does seem that way.
On the Indy side, I think Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor are pretty easy starts at this point. I'm probably not playing anyone else outside of those two unless it's a desperate situation.
Yeah, I think like Wentz in deeper leagues, if you're looking for a spot starter, is in play just because, the Colts have the high implied total. Wentz obviously coming off his best game of the season against Baltimore. He finished quarterback 7 last week. Houston 21st in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. So I don't love Wentz, but I might play him over someone like Kirk Cousins this week if you were using Cousins early this season.
Yeah, if you're looking way down the rankings, there's certainly upside to Wentz. It's just such a deep position that I hope you don't have to look that deep. Rams at the Giants. Rams by 9.5 on the road, over under a 48.5. And the Giants side we'll start with because it's really those injuries that are the story. Daniel Jones apparently has a chance to play, according to Joe Judge. He did not practice at all Wednesday, but Joe Judge said things were heading in the right direction. That's surprising after seeing the way Daniel Jones left the field in Dallas, but we'll watch that through the week. I certainly think that affects, I don't know. Yep. There's a chance that Jones is a fantasy option for some people, but I think it more so affects the wide receivers for the Giants.
Yeah, it definitely affects the wide receivers and Devontae Booker, who, as we said, was a big pickup on waiver wires this week. Jones, to me, he'd be, in the lower end quarterback one mix if he gets cleared. The Rams pass defense has been pretty average this season. They're 20th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. And Daniel Jones was a quarterback 1 in 3 of his first 4 games of the season. So he'd be an option if he's cleared.
Mm-hmm. Kenny Golladay doesn't seem like he's going to be an option, but Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton did return to limited practices Wednesday. So we'll watch how those guys progress through the week. Between them, I think Shepard's the only one that I'm really seriously considering.
I think Tony's still my favorite here, even with Shepard back. I was just wrong about Tony. Like, I didn't like him as a prospect. To me, like I already just see it. That he's just good. He gets so much separation and he's good after the catch. Interesting thing last week too is he played about 2/3 of his snaps on the outside. I think after Golladay left, they kind of moved him to the outside, which is nice if he could stay there and Shepard could stay in the slot. I think that'd be good for both of those guys.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the other way around. So we'll see where it goes. But there is certainly room for both of those guys to get targets because Jason Garrett doesn't like to throw the ball to Evan Engram.
Yes, that's right.
Devontae Booker, a top 20 fantasy option. I think all you can really say about that is to insert the Ferris Bueller life comes at you fast gift.
Booker was second in expected fantasy points last week among running backs, despite Barkley playing the first quarter of that game. Booker got 19 of the 20 running back opportunities after Barkley left. So he's going to get the volume. It's probably not going to be pretty, but the volume should propel him to a pretty decent fantasy day.
It's definitely not going to be pretty, but yeah, he's definitely an option. I remember liking Devontae Booker back when he was a prospect coming out of Utah, but I have since been proven wrong, and now he's simply an option because he's going to get the ball.
He's pretty good in the passing game. I'm not going to say he's good. He's good enough where the Giants should kind of be able to just use him in Saquon Barkley's role.
He's good enough that the Giants were like, get out of here, Wayne Gallman. We've got Devontae Booker now.
Yeah, they gave him like a 2-year deal, right? Like they obviously like the guy.
Yeah, and then he was a healthy scratch 2 weeks ago. So right. On the Rams side, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, even Darrell Henderson, pretty easy starts at this point. And Robert Woods certainly a lot easier after he finally had that breakout game on Thursday night. I think Tyler Higbee is a little bit easier because of the matchup and because his position stinks, but he's certainly no lock to get target volume.
Yeah, after a couple weeks, I was excited about Higbee. I'm less excited now. He's 17th among tight ends in targets, as you alluded to. He's 16th in our expected fantasy points, and he's been okay. He's finished as a top 12 fantasy tight end in 3 of the first 4 weeks so far, or 3 of the first 5 weeks. But he has overachieved based on the usage he's getting. So he's a low end tight end 1. Just being in this Rams offense helps him because I do think he's, a pretty decent touchdown bet every week.
Yeah, in some places he might be a sell high at this point because of those touchdowns. He's doing well on touchdown rate versus the usage that he's getting so far. Surprising amount of Sony Michel consideration this week, I have seen at least. He saw basically half of Darrell Henderson's playing time last week and 11 pass play snaps versus 27 for Darrell Henderson. And his playing time, too, for Sony Michel was very concentrated in that game. 9 of his 11 carries and his only target came on a single drive in the second quarter. And we saw at that time Darrell Henderson on the sideline getting either his arm or shoulder checked out.
Right. Michel basically played he got 2 series to himself in that game. And it just so happened to be that those were 2 pretty long drives for the Rams, and Michel was able to rack up touches. So I still think this is like an 80-20 split in favor of Darrell Henderson, and I still think Michel is just a handcuff.
Yeah, and Henderson's not on the injury report this week, so there's no issue there lingering. I don't see Michel as a real week 6 option unless you're desperate.
Agreed.
Anything else worth talking about from the Rams side?
Nope.
The LA Chargers at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens by 3, over under of 52.5. I'd have a hard time sitting any of the Chargers core 4 here, talking about Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, and the 2 wideouts. I think the only other guy really worth mentioning is Jared Cook, and he kind of is what he is at this point. There's upside if he gets targets, but his target counts so far have been 8, 5, 3, 7, 3, 12.6% target share. He's basically Tyler Higbee, albeit in an offense that's throwing the ball a little bit more.
And Donald Parham has been stealing some touchdowns, and Parham's route rates have been climbing slowly. He set a season high last week at 36%. Jared Cook was still at 68%. So, Cook's still the guy there. I'll be curious to see if, as we get deeper in the season, if Parham starts stealing more. But yeah, Cook kind of looks like a touchdown or bust fantasy play. And, that's not the worst thing in the world when you're on this Chargers offense, man. I want to become a Chargers fan. I love this team. So fun.
Oh yeah. It's a fun team to watch, and I enjoyed. I like Justin Herbert as a prospect coming in. So the way that his career is going, it just makes me smile every time I see a positive story on him on TV. And this could be a matchup that pushes passing volume, especially for an offense that already wants to lean that way. So if you are deciding between Jared Cook and somebody else in that nebulous tight end cloud, then Jared Cook certainly has upside in the spot. On the Baltimore side, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown. I think the only thing to really consider here is how high Brown belongs in the wide receiver rankings.
Yeah, so he's been awesome. He's finished as a top 17 fantasy wide receiver in 4 of the first 5 weeks. So a couple causes for concern this week. Hollywood is the 3rd biggest overachiever at wide receiver so far. If you compare his actual fantasy points versus expected fantasy points, he's still 16th in expected fantasy points. So it's not like he's not getting usage. He's just been a lot better than the usage he's been getting. But the bigger concern for me is the Chargers have been really good. First, just against the pass in general, and second against number 1 wide receivers. Football Outsiders says them 12th against number 1 wideouts, but if you look at the box scores, they limited Terry McLaurin to 4 catches for 62 yards. They limited Tyreek Hill to 5 for 56. Odell Beckham had just 2 for 20 last week. So, that's kind of been the calling card for the Chargers is shutting down opposing number 1 wideouts. So I'm downgrading Hollywood a bit in this matchup. I think he's still like a lower end wide receiver 2 this week.
Yeah, likely starting for most teams. This is also a potential run funneling matchup. The Chargers aren't scary against the pass. They're 11th in pass defense DVOA, but percentage-wise, they're actually in positive territory. So the takeaway there is only 10 defenses are technically negative matchups for pass offenses so far, and only 3 defenses in the entire league are in double-digit territory in terms of that negative percentage by the Football Outsiders numbers. It's Buffalo, Carolina, Arizona. I think beyond that, you don't really make strong adjustments for the passing matchup. So it'll depend more, I think, on what Baltimore wants to do here. And I think there's a chance that the Ravens try to run the ball more in this game. I mean, in addition to being something that they have been good at, I don't think they have the running backs now that they normally do, but it could also keep the Chargers offense off the field a little bit if they're able to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a big rushing game for Lamar Jackson, at least. I don't know what to do with the backfield. There's like nothing you can take away from last week because they just, they hardly ran it at all. When they did, they weren't effective. They fell behind early. It looked like Latavius Murray was still the lead back. Tyson Williams was active. It was Le'Veon Bell who was healthy scratched last week. So I think Latavius is the best bet. He's like a decent RB3 play this week because I do like the rushing matchup for the Ravens.
Yeah, he's like James Conner level usable, I think.
Yep, agreed.
Anything else from that game?
No.
Green Bay at Chicago, Packers by 4.5, over under 45. On the Packers side, we know all the usuals, and what's been usual this year is Robert Tonyan giving us 8 yards receiving or less. That was the same last week. It's the 4th time this season among 5 games, and his playing time was down against the Bengals compared with the previous 2 weeks. The Bears now come into this one as both a negative passing matchup and a negative tight end coverage matchup.
Yep. Sorry if I convinced anyone to use Tonyan last week. I did like him because that route rate spiked in week 4 with that MVS. But like you said, it was back down to just 63% last week, which is not a great number. Tonyan, 21st among tight ends in targets, 20th in expected fantasy points. So he's just not getting the usage.
Well, they just couldn't find him because A.J. Dillon turned into a receiving dynamo last week with a 4 for 49 and a touchdown receiving line at Cincinnati. What do we do with that, Jared?
Yeah, I'm not buying Dillon yet, at least. He's playing well enough where maybe his role continues to grow, but in the role he's in now, you still can't trust him. Even last week, he still played just 33% of the offensive snaps. Despite that receiving production, he only ran her out on 24% of the pass plays. His role hasn't really changed much from the start of the season. So I need to see the playing time change before I can consider him like a RB3 or flex.
I agree. I should point out Atheist for the Cause in our on YouTube for us pointed out that Robert Tonyan got hurt in that game. So to be fair, since we are doing a little Tonyan bashing right now, he did come away with a knee issue. He's limited in practice Wednesday. So maybe that factored into it, but he's done a lot more of nothing than something this year. So on the Bears side of this game, I'm trying to use nothing. I mean, I think even Damian Williams sits too high in our rankings after he basically split work with Khalil Herbert last week.
Yeah, I mean, Herbert ended up playing more snaps. He had more carries. Damian did get all 3 running back targets. Damian Williams did get 3 of the 4 carries inside the 5-yard line. So I do think Williams is going to get the higher value touches. It also looked like they used Herbert more to kind of salt the game away with the lead, and I do think they're going to be playing from behind against Green Bay here. So I think you'll see Williams take over as the leader in terms of snaps and touches. Yeah, he's not going to get Devontae Booker level usage this week. Booker is the better volume bet among those 2 guys.
I think you're hunting a little bit too much for signal there. I don't think there's anything that we can read from it yet. And target-wise, the Bears have 22 total running back targets through 5 games this year. That whole position has 3 more targets than Cole Kmet does through 5 games. I would play Devontae Booker, Darrell Williams, Chase Edmonds, Josh Jacobs over Damian Williams this week among our PPR rankings right now. I might even play both Denver backs and Zach Moss over Damian Williams this week.
Can't say you're crazy for any of those. Chase Edmonds, I worried about the shoulder. We'll see what he does in practice over the next couple of days.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Allen Robinson, by the way, dealing with an ankle injury. So we might finally have a reason to not play him because other than that he's not delivering at all.
He hasn't even finished as a top 50 fantasy wideout in any of the first 5 weeks. Not even top 50. He has literally killed your fantasy team in all 5 weeks so far.
That's so sad. It's a fine spot, though, for Darnell Mooney if you're looking down in that range, like Jalen Waddle territory, probably in the wide receiver rankings, especially with no Jair Alexander on the Green Bay side. The problem is that Justin Fields has yet to throw more than 20 passes in a game this season. So we can't bet on volume at all.
I mean, Mooney had the nice week 4. He's been 44th or worse in fantasy points in the other 4 games. He's also just 46th among wideouts in expected fantasy points. So you're just kind of hoping that he connects on one long play if he's going to help you.
Mm-hmm. And we can get out of that game now, right?
Yes, let's go to this next one. This next one's good.
That's right. Kansas City at Washington, Chiefs by 6.5, over under 55.5, the highest over under the week because the defenses suck. And at least one of the offenses is really good. And the other one has upside. We'll go to the one that we know is really good first because the Chiefs lead the week in team implied total. I mean, watch out for angry Patrick Mahomes coming off last week. The other thing we're really going to have to watch is Tyreek Hill's quad injury. Andy Reid said after the Sunday night game against the Bills that it was a knee issue at that point. He said he expected Hill to play in the game. No practice for Hill on Wednesday. So, just a situation we're going to have to watch.
Yeah, hopefully he gets out there because it's obviously a blow-up spot for this Chiefs passing game and offense in general. I think McCole Hardman is the guy people are going to be wondering about after, he had a productive game against the Bills on Sunday night. His route rate did come back up. It was in the low 60s in weeks 3 and 4. It was back up to 71% last week. That was probably at least partly due to the fact that they, fell behind and were playing in catch-up mode all night. Demarcus Robinson still ran more pass routes than McCole Hardman. last week. So he still comes with a low floor. But again, if you think Mahomes is going for 404 in this game, which I kind of think he is, I do think Hardman is a decent like wide receiver 3 or flex play.
Yeah, just make sure that you don't figure that Mecole Hardman is a lock to be involved in that, because that was also the first game since Josh Gordon joined the team. And Josh Gordon got on the field, barely, but got on the field and did have a catch despite being out of football for 2 years before that. So they clearly want him involved to some degree. They're going to spread it around. The only locks are Travis Kelce and, if he's healthy, Tyreek Hill. So, we'll see beyond that. Certainly upside. Darrell Williams, he's obviously the top back for the Chiefs this week. I think the biggest mental hurdle for people is that they look at the Chiefs and see that they like to split touches in the backfield. And maybe that's the case. Maybe they do it this week. But you could also read that as Darrell Williams was already stealing touches from Clyde Edwards-Helaire when he was healthy. So now that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not playing, Darrell Williams is going to easily lead that group. So Jerick McKinnon has 1 carry on the season. He has 3 targets so far after they signed him in the offseason. Again, Williams was already siphoning opportunities. I obviously don't know. None of us knows exactly how it's going to get broken down in the backfield here. And, they're probably going to lean pass. They're already one of the more pass-leaning teams in neutral situations on the season. But it's an undeniably terrific situation for scoring opportunities for Darrell Williams. And there's nobody else in the backfield that clearly does any of the things better than he does at this point.
Yeah, I think Williams might just end up getting the CEH role plus the goal line stuff that he was already getting when CEH was healthy. So that'd be higher end RB2 usage if he gets that. And we got 32 Chiefs snaps after Edwards-Helaire left last week. Williams played 24 snaps to just 8 for Jerick McKinnon. Darrell Williams had 6 of the 7 running back opportunities. So I think McKinnon is going to mix in passing situations, but I think Williams is going to handle the majority of the ball carrying stuff and do some stuff in the passing game. Washington actually has played the run pretty tough so far. It's in the passing game where they've been very bad. So it's not a great individual matchup for Williams, but it like you said, it's such a good scoring environment for the Chiefs. I do think Williams is a pretty decent touchdown bet this week.
Yes, I agree with that. Now to the Washington side, where we'll take a little peek behind the curtain of our weekly projections process. We split up the games, so each of us takes some of them, then we combine them in the system, and then we argue out the rankings at each position. So I had the Kansas City-Washington game. I projected Taylor Heinicke for a little bit more than 300 yards, and I was like, all right, I'm going to leave this here and see what Jared does with this, because he considers one of his main tasks to be popping my projections balloon anytime that I'm really excited about a player. Barely knocked him down at all. I had to give you credit this week, Jared, because I was all ready to see Taylor Heinicke move way down, and he didn't. I think it's a great week for Taylor Heinicke.
Well, I mean, the projections were right. If your projections are wrong, that's when that's when I have to change them. But yeah, I mean, Heinicke wasn't good in fantasy last week against the Saints, which we kind of projected. It was a tough matchup. He finished quarterback 13, quarterback 9, and quarterback 5 in the 3 games before that. And now he gets the Chiefs, who are 31st in Football Outsiders pass D. They're 32nd in adjusted points allowed to quarterback. So, we talked when we were doing rankings review on Tuesday about Heinicke versus Dak Prescott, and I picked up Heinicke in my main event league, and Dak is my other quarterback. So I actually have to make that decision now. I have Heinicke in right now over Dak Prescott. I don't see how he doesn't deliver in this spot.
I agree. The only time that he has not delivered so far this season was last week against the Saints, who are 3rd in defensive DVOA, 5th against the pass. So, I mean, it was a bad matchup, and, it's understandable that he didn't. Before that, 24-plus fantasy points in 3 straight outings, including at Buffalo in a down passing outing. So, yeah, it should be a good week for Taylor Heinicke. Nothing is given in football. I mean, that's why so many of us are looking for answers every week in this. But it's a great spot against a defense that's just been horrible and been giving up fantasy points to everybody. Terry McLaurin's obvious. He's obvious most weeks, even more so this week. Antonio Gibson, I think, is a pretty easy play as well. Is Ricky Seals-Jones already an easy play too?
He is, yeah. I think I tweeted that he got borderline elite usage last week. I actually think it was just straight elite usage last week. He ran her out on 87% of the pass plays, 8 targets. It was a 20% target share. Ricky Seals-Jones finished 4th in expected fantasy points among tight ends last week, and now he's in this game environment against this defense. So I would be happy using RSJ in fantasy lineups this week.
Yeah, pick up Ricky Seals' country album and then play him in your fantasy lineups on Sunday. There is some game script upside as well for J.D. McKissic in this one.
Yep.
If you're RB hunting, and I know because of how many people are talking about Devontae Booker, Darrell Williams, and the like, there is RB hunting this week. So there's upside. You obviously can't count on J.D. McKissic delivering, but there's a shot.
Yeah, I looked into his win-loss splits over the last 2 seasons. His rushing volume doesn't really change in wins versus losses, but he goes from 5.1 targets per game in wins to 6.8 targets per game in losses. So, he does get a boost in games. Washington is playing from behind him.
And certainly no Logan Thomas, no Curtis Samuel, whoever else is missing can only help J.D. McKissic in that. Because not only does he get more targets if they're trailing, but he can also play wide receiver spots. It's not all backfield stuff for him.
Yes.
Arizona at Cleveland, Browns by 3 in this one, over under 49.5. It's down 4.5 points from where it opened for whatever reason. Season high in targets and receiving yards for DeAndre Hopkins last week against the 49ers. Seems like the rib injury is behind him. But Jared, what else should I do with this pass catching core?
Yeah, so with the over-under, I think I saw there's supposed to be some pretty bad wind in this game. And I don't know how accurate that is, this far in advance, but that over-under has moved, as you said. So that's going to be worth watching as we get to Sunday morning. Rondale Moore, man, this could be it. And Max Williams being out for the season with his knee injury, that could help Rondale Moore too if the Cardinals use some more 4 wide receiver sets. But Moore ran more routes than Christian Kirk last week for the first time this season. So if Moore is passing Kirk as the number 3 wideout, that's when we can start to trust him in fantasy lineup. So we'll kind of see if it becomes a trend this week or if it was just a 1-week blip.
Speaking of that weather, by the way, we're getting into the time of year where last year we had those 2 or 3 just awful weather games in Cleveland. So that's definitely going to be something to watch heading into this one this week.
Yes, there was no passing production in those games. So that's definitely something worth watching.
Chase Edmonds, James Conner, I think they just kind of are what they are at this point. 5 rushing touchdowns for James Conner over the past 3 weeks. But I think the only real surprise in that range, besides him finding the end zone that much, is how handily Arizona beat the Rams on the road in week 4, which really beefed up rushing volume. Otherwise, his role looks kind of clear.
Yeah, he's pretty much a touchdown or bust guy. He is 16th in the NFL in carries, but he's only 31st in rushing yards. He's not doing anything in the passing game. But, I mean, he clearly is Arizona's goal line back. He's 2nd in the NFL in carries inside the 5-yard line. So he's a good touchdown back, but if he does not score, he's probably going to hurt you, especially if you're in a PPR league.
On the Cleveland side, the 2 big questions, I think, are 1, do we keep trusting Odell Beckham? And 2, what in the world do we do with what David Njoku did last week?
Yeah, I picked up Njoku in so many leagues after week 1, and I dropped him in most of them since. So I think he's worth grabbing. I wouldn't trust him yet. Even last week, he ran a route on 55% of the pass plays. It was just a bit higher than Austin Hooper. What you have to hope is that his massive game earns him a bigger role going forward. And if he can get up to like 70% of the routes, that's when you can start to trust him. So to me, he's an ad, but try not to use him yet.
Yeah, he's still young enough that he could just be breaking out finally. I think what might be most important to this is what he's doing like in practice and, when they're in meetings, whether the coaches are like, all right, David Njoku is finally getting it. It's time to unlock this athletic upside that's always been here. And I don't think we can really know that until we see him play more in games. So I agree. Yeah. Nice guy to stash if you have room to stash a tight end. Tough to believe in anything right now, but there is upside to potentially mine here.
Arizona also first in Football Outsiders tight end coverage rankings and 3rd in adjusted points allowed to the position. So it's a tough matchup for these tight ends.
And again, one of those 3 pass defenses that has actually been a truly negative matchup so far. So you do downgrade for that. Everything else I think is pretty straightforward on the Cleveland side. Jarvis Landry, they're talking about maybe he'll get back, but he could not get back on the practice field Wednesday. So as of now, he's still on IR.
Yeah, OBJ, I'm going to use him in tournaments again. I can't help myself, DFS tournaments. I do think in season long, he's benchable if you have safer options. His first 2 weeks back, the usage was awesome. Last week, the usage was not awesome. So that's concerning. But this should be a good spot for him just because it should be a higher scoring game. The Browns might find themselves playing from behind.
Unless the weather is terrible, he's not the kind of guy that I would sit for like Robbie Anderson or Jalen Waddle or Darnell Mooney.
Agreed.
Las Vegas at Denver, the Broncos by 3.5, over under 44. I think the biggest question here might be one that we cannot answer, and it's, does the whole John Gruden situation affect the team? I mean, we'll see come Sunday whether it does. And more, I guess on a smaller level, is there any noticeable difference in the play calling now that they have booted the coach who has been calling plays for the past several years?
Do we know, is it Greg Olson that's stepping in as the play call? I would assume it kind of has to be, right? Their offensive
I think Derek Carr.
Yeah, it might be. I can't see the whole Gruden thing being good news for this team. And it's obviously a really tough spot in Denver against a good defense. So I'm, outside of Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, who I think we should talk about, I'm not using anyone on the Raiders.
Yes, I agree with trying to do that. Josh Jacobs, I agree, is definitely worth talking about. He's not exciting, but the fact that he got 5 targets each of the past 2 weeks kind of is exciting.
Yeah, like they're finally going to start using him in the passing game. Like after spending all that money on Kenny and Drake, I've been surprised to see it, and I didn't buy it after week 4. But when you get 2 games in a row of 5 targets, and the route rates have been pretty strong, I think they might finally be using Jacobs in the passing game, and that's big for him too because he's been such a game script dependent running back, and this is obviously a bad spot as a road underdog against a tough run defense. But if he's going to keep seeing a handful of targets, that makes him easier to trust.
I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to be awesome the rest of the way. I do think there is some buy low appeal to him right now because it's not going to cost very much, I think.
Yeah, the usage is good. The thing to me is he just doesn't look good to me. And his efficiency numbers kind of back that up. So that's the concern. But if he's going to get this type of volume, he should be decent.
Speaking of decent, Hunter Renfrow would be insulted if you use that word to describe the way he's playing so far. He's caught either 5 or 6 passes in every game so far. He's tied for 20th among wideouts and targets. He's tied for 15th in receptions. He's tied with Marquise Brown in each of those categories, among other guys. Hunter Renfrow has as many receptions as Stephon Diggs through 5 weeks. He has more targets, more catches, and more receiving yards than Tyler Boyd.
Stop! I can't take it.
He's just play him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So again, I don't like this spot for the Raiders offense, and it's a tough Broncos secondary, tough matchup in the slot for Renfrow against Bryce Callahan. But yeah, Renfrow is 31st among wideouts in expected fantasy points. So he's getting wide receiver 3 level usage. He's been even better than that as far as actual points. So he should definitely be owned in PPR leagues. I would still try not to use him this week.
Cole Beasley without the controversy and with less around him at wide receiver. Terrible spot for Henry Ruggs, who is boom bust anyway, so I'm probably not using him in, I don't know, pretty much any place.
Yep, agreed.
On the Denver side, it's potentially an upside rushing spot for the Broncos if things are off for the Raiders and they're not scoring much. It's tough to get excited about either Broncos running back, but, it should at least be decent to positive game script as opposed to last week.
Yeah, the Raiders D is 30th in adjusted points allowed to running backs. We'll have to watch Melvin Gordon. He didn't practice on Wednesday. He's been sitting out practices for the past couple of weeks, but this is a new injury. He's on there with a hip this week where it's been lower leg. So, if Gordon sits, Javonte Williams becomes almost a must start.
Yeah. Cortland Sutton is fine apparently after that late week ankle sprain last week because he had a big game against Pittsburgh. And I wouldn't worry about Noah Fant coming off his quiet day in Pittsburgh. His playing time was up in that game in the wake of Albert Okwuegbunam's hamstring injury, and Albert O did land on IR before that game, so he's out at least 2 more weeks.
Yeah, Fans actually set season highs in route rates the last 2 weeks, 86 and then 88%. So we're seeing Albert O's absence, get him on the field a bit more in past situations. So even though the usage hasn't been there or the production hasn't been there, I do still like Fant. I think he's pretty easy top 8 tight end play this week.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to hit on the wide receivers for Denver?
You seem to be a bigger Tim Patrick fan than me. His usage has just been, he's getting like wide receiver 4 level usage. And it is a good matchup here, so I think he's in play. But the floor still feels pretty low to me.
Yeah, he's an efficient receiver who just doesn't get that much work. So I always feel like he's somebody that we should talk about, and then there's just not much to say. I mean, if he's getting 6 targets and he catches 4 or 5 of them, cool. Some people are going to be able to use that. Other people are not. There's just not a whole lot to say.
Yep, that's about right.
Dallas at New England, Cowboys by 3.5. That's up 1.5 from where it opened. Over under 52. That's up 4 points. So maybe there'll be some points here. If Davis Mills can throw for 312 and 3 touchdowns, I'm just going to mention that as many times as possible on this show against New England. I'm certainly not scared for Dak Prescott in the matchup. The real issue here is that Dallas wants to run the ball, and I'm not sure that New England's offense can push them out of doing that.
Yeah, I think Dak will be plenty efficient when he does throw. I'm not sure how many attempts you're going to get from in this game. So Dallas, since week one, that Bucs game where they went super pass heavy, over the last 4 weeks, they're 30th in situation neutral pass rate. So, the third run heaviest team in the NFL. And the Pats they're by Football Outsiders numbers, they're quite a bit better against the pass than the run. They're 22nd against the run, according to Football Outsiders. So I expect this to be a run heavy game plan from Dallas.
Davis Mills says that the Football Outsiders have no idea what they're talking about.
I think New England was like second or third in DVOA until last week. So,
yeah, but I'm pretty sure that they were second in pass defense DVOA heading into last week, and now DVOA is like, I don't know what to do with this. Mari Cooper appeared to hurt her foot or ankle in the end zone against the Giants last week at one point, but he's not on the injury report at all Wednesday, so I guess we shouldn't worry about that. I think he and CeeDee Lamb and Zeke Elliott are certainly starting for most teams. The run lean has been so extreme lately that it's tough to feel totally comfy with Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Their target counts have been down, but it's also, I'm not sure I could feel comfy not playing either guy. At this point, I'm glad that I wasn't drafting them just so I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah, that lack of pass volume is really hurting both of these guys over the last 4 weeks. Lamb is 40th among wideouts in our expected fantasy points, and Amari Cooper is 49th. So that's scary, and they're going to continue to be efficient, I think, because they're good players and they're playing with Dak Prescott. But I think they're both going to have some duds, with the Cowboys going this run heavy. I was looking at the Cowboys schedule, by the way. It's going to have to open up for them the rest of the way because they have some game. They play the Chiefs. They play a couple other teams where I think there's going to be some shootouts. I think it's going to get better for Lamb and Cooper, but I think this week, the passing volume is going to be pretty low again.
Yeah, I will say I don't think there's anywhere to go but up from what they've gotten the past 3 weeks. Dalton Schultz has led this
that's the other problem
in targets over the past 3 weeks. I don't think that's going to continue, but just in terms of Dalton Schultz, it's obviously nothing but good news. He's got 3 straight 6-catch games. He's caught 6 balls in 4 of his 5 games this year. Obviously Dallas likes what he's giving them, and when you compare that to the rest of the tight end position, it's pretty easy to just like Dalton Schultz the rest of the way now.
Yeah, and he's easily led the team in targets the past 3 weeks. 23 for Schultz versus just 14 for CeeDee Lamb and 13 for Amari Cooper. I agree that's not going to continue. But we again saw Schultz easily beat Jarwin in pass routes last week. So it's clear he's their top guy. And I'll buy him being the third option in the passing game, at least until Michael Gallup is back. And that's good enough.
Yeah, and even at that point, I think he'll get enough to be weekly viable at tight end. On the Patriots side, Jacoby Myers remains a solid PPR bet, but he's been outside the past 2 weeks more than he was before. And I think there are a couple of contributors there. Hunter Henry has operated in the slot more over his past 3 games versus the previous 2. And Kendrick Bourne has spent nearly all of his limited time in the slot over the past 2. I'm not sure how much it matters for Jacoby Myers. As long as he's getting targets, he'll be fine. And he remains averse to scoring touchdowns. So that caps his upside, but he's fine.
He got tackled at the 1 last week too, so he's going to score. He's going to score one of these weeks. Myers is 11th among wideouts in expected fantasy points. He's 10th in targets, 7th in catches, so he's getting really nice usage. That moving more to the outside, that'd mean more Trayvon Diggs in this matchup, which is a slight concern. But yeah, I'm with you. I think just volume kind of makes Myers a pretty safe fantasy play, especially New England should be having to throw it plenty in this game.
Yeah, worth mentioning that Trayvon Diggs is also dealing with an ankle issue this week that I believe kept him out of Wednesday's practice. So we'll keep an eye on that for everybody's matchups on the Patriots side for this one. I'm waiting for the game where Jacoby Myers is going into the end zone untouched and fumbles. That's going to be the ultimate.
Yeah.
Hunter Henry, by the way, I mentioned him. He's coming off a 675-1 receiving line, touchdowns in 2 straight now. He's a solid option in that range where we don't like any of the tight ends.
He is, yeah. And Jonnu Smith ran 6 pass routes last week. So he's just been kind of phased out. He's on the field. He's just blocking. They're using him as like a 6th lineman at this point. So that makes Henry easier to trust. I think he's a low-end tight end 1 at this point.
Jonnu Smith must – I don't watch Jonnu Smith block. Is he just blowing people up and they just can't – they can't bring themselves to take him out of blocking duty, and that's why he never catches passes? And I guess – is it a combo of that and he's just a total jerk off the field, so nobody wants to give him numbers? It's funny when you look at the athleticism, the money that they're paying him, and then just a second team now not giving him that much.
Well, and like every time he catches the ball, especially after the catch, he always looks good. So I don't know. He's a strange player that has been burning people for a few years now.
Mm-hmm. The other thing to watch for New England is Damian Harris's rib injury. No practice for him Wednesday, so we'll see where that goes through the week. Obviously, can't really make a call on whether to play him now. And I mean, is there anything else to like on the New England offense?
No, I mean, I think it would be Ramondre Stevenson as the lead ball carrier if Harris doesn't play. Stevenson was active last week for the first time since week 1, had 11 carries, just 23 yards. The Patriots were missing 4 of their O-linemen, so we'll see if the O-line gets healthier. But Stevenson would be like the fill-in, I think, if Harris is out.
Brandon Bolden, 22 opportunity game coming in now.
Could be.
Seattle at Pittsburgh Sunday night. Steelers by 4.5. That's up 1 from where it started. The over-under is 42, which is down a point. And the main reason to not like anything here is that the Seahawks will be opening a game without Russell Wilson for the first time since he entered the league. The Seahawks have the second lowest team total of the week, behind only Houston. Not sure if that's fair to the Texans and new star Davis Mills, but at some level, you have to go with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Jared, I'm not really sure what level that is, though. I don't know if we can know until this game starts.
Yeah, I think like Metcalf's a wide receiver 2 for me, and Lockett's a wide receiver 3. I don't have any numbers to base this on, but Lockett feels like he's going to be hurt more. I just think Metcalf is just like physically a more dominant player, and I just think Lockett kind of benefits from that chemistry with Russell Wilson a bit more. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But both Metcalf and Lockett saw 4 of Geno Smith's 18 targets in that game last week. So, no edge there. The matchup is at least good. Pittsburgh's been much tougher against the run than the pass. And I do think Lockett and Metcalf will both get enough volume to, have decent fantasy days at least.
Yeah, Geno Smith looked okay in relief against the Rams. He did enter a game where his team trailed by 9. So, I mean, it behooved the Rams to sit back a little bit and see what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Produced 1 touchdown, also threw a pick. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are both excellent football players. So I think that's why they remain in consideration, even though Seattle is taking about as big a step back at quarterback as any team could from starter to backup. You use them at some level. They both should still be more efficient than most other receivers will be on the same opportunities. Again, we'll see exactly what the dip to Geno Smith means here. If you do have Metcalf or Lockett, I think you hope that Pittsburgh jumps out to a big lead in this game. Yeah. Then they have to throw it like 40, 42 times, just because then if he's completing 20 of them, then we'll get something from those guys. Still no practice, by the way. No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say Pittsburgh's 24th in both Football Outsiders pass D and adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. Geno's going to be fun on Sunday night. He's going to turn it over 3 times, but he's going to throw 2 touchdowns. He's going to run for 50 yards and a score. It's going to be fun.
You just predicted 3 total touchdowns from Geno Smith. I'm gonna have to clip that one out and put it on Twitter, I think. Still no practice for Chris Carson on Wednesday after he missed last week with the neck issue. And it sounds like it's going to be something that could be an issue all season that they'll have to manage, maybe fix, at least watch. Pete Carroll was talking about it not being something that like happened in a game, but something that had lingered for a while that they weren't even sure how it started, maybe a weightlifting thing for Chris Carson. So we'll see where it goes. For now, we're just going to have to watch how he progresses through this week and hope that we know by, Sunday, whether he's going to play or not.
Yeah. And if Carson is going to play, the backfield pretty much being a void for me because, he was losing work to Alex Collins even before this injury. And it's a tough matchup against a good Steelers run defense. If Carson's out, I think Alex Collins is a low level option. He got decent playing. He got clear lead back usage last week. The fantasy production wasn't huge. And again, this matchup isn't good. So I wouldn't expect a big game out of Collins, but I think you get 15 plus touches out of him if Chris Carson is out again.
I would play at least everybody down through Zach Moss ahead of Alex Collins with no Chris Carson.
Oh yeah, I'd play Moss over Collins.
All right. Well, good. I think that Rashad Penny, if you're sitting here right now and you're disappointed that you missed out on Devontae Booker and Darrell Williams and Damian Williams and all the other crappy guys that you didn't want to draft initially, maybe stash Rashad Penny in a spot at the bottom of the roster and see what happens. He's still on IR right now. I think he's out at least one more game beyond this one based on when he went down. But if he makes it back from that calf injury, there's potential opportunity here, even for a guy who's been much more disappointing than he has been helpful.
Would you rather stash Rashad Penny or Marlon Mack, who's been, supposedly on the trade block and teams are interested, blah, blah, blah?
I mean, I guess I would stash Mack right now because he's healthy and see if somebody trades for him. Because if he comes a Chief by the weekend or early next week, then Marlon Mack over Rashad Penny easily. If we get past the trade deadline and he doesn't go anywhere, then he's dropping for somebody else. And the other thing is, if you miss out on Rashad Penny, I don't think you're going to miss out on something.
Yeah. Chiefs or the Ravens, I think, would be an awesome spot if Mack could end up there.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what happens there. I'd still find it hard to believe that teams are like, hey, Baltimore, we're interested in that stable of running backs you got. What's it going to take to get one of those guys from you?
All right.
On the Steelers side of this game, I think you should expect low passing volume like we had last week against Denver. I would expect similar game flow, obviously, assuming that the Steelers can score some points, and Seattle has not been terrific on defense so far. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, I think are fine as wide receiver twos, regardless of the volume outlook. Najee Harris is a must, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I do think the Juju injury is a big one. I mean, he averaged 7.7 targets in his 3 healthy games this season, and I think it obviously doesn't hurt Deontay Johnson, but I think Chase Claypool is the one that's really going to benefit. I think he's going to be on the field a bit more. I think he's going to pick up extra volume. I mean, you still got to deal with trying to catch passes from Ben Roethlisberger, but I do think it's going to make Claypool someone you can rely on as an every week fantasy starter going forward.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what playing time looks like when James Washington's back healthy, limited Wednesday practice coming off his groin injury. So seems like he's getting close. They did bring in Anthony Miller, but only added him to the practice squad. So it looks like they're going to roll forward with the guys they got, including Ray McLeod as the potential slot leader. So, again, we'll see how the playing time goes going forward. By the way, before we get to the last game, Azar Ahmed on YouTube says Tyreek Hill not practicing today. So
oh boy,
definitely something we're going to have to watch even more than we thought. And obviously, if Tyreek Hill is out, Mecole Hardman suddenly gets strapped to a rocket ship for this week.
Yep, Hardman, and you'd even have to consider like DeMarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle at that point. Man, Hill can't miss this game. It's too good.
I know. So we'll see where that one goes. We'll keep an eye on it. But for now, we'll shift to the Monday night game. Buffalo at Tennessee. They already got revenge on the Chiefs last week. Now they can get revenge on Tennessee for, what was it, a Tuesday night game last year that was COVID delayed, where they got beat up. Literally, that was the Derrick Henry stiff arm game. So they should be angry. They're 6-point favorites in this one. It's a 54-point over-under. It's the week's second highest over-under. The Bills, of course, have the second highest team total behind only the Chiefs. So we'll start with negative. Cole Beasley, just 2 targets each of the past 2 weeks, and his playing time has been down each of those games as well, all the way down to 39% last week.
Yeah, Dawson Knox is officially a problem for Cole Beasley. Knox is basically the third option in the Bills passing game now. Beasley's routes have been down to 67% in week 4 and then 53% last week. So he's not a guy I don't think you can trust in fantasy lineups right now. We'll see. Maybe it turns into a thing where Beasley and Knox are kind of alternating weeks as that third option, but it's been Knox the past 2 weeks at least.
Mm-hmm. Emmanuel Sanders, 48 plus receiving yards in each game, so a better bet than Cole Beasley, averaging just 3.8 catches, so certainly not a lock, but the Bills are the league's most pass-leaning team in neutral situations, so it's a good position in which to be that kind of, decent floor bet.
Yeah. I mean, Sanders is 21st in actual fantasy points, and he's 27th in our expected fantasy points. So, to me, he's like almost an every week wide receiver 3 at this point.
Mm-hmm. You already mentioned Dawson Knox scored in 4 straight games, so it's tough not to use him. And he's obviously not a lock for volume, but he's in a great situation to hit the boom side of that boom bust label.
Yeah, I mean, he's on the field a ton for this, explosive pass heavy offense. So it's a great situation for him.
Zach Moss, season high 4 targets against Kansas City, and just 2 targets for Devin Singletary in that game, who saw season lows in playing time at just 26% of the snaps and in carries. First game in single-digit carries for Devin Singletary this season in a game that they were leading the whole time. So only good news for Zach Moss, I think.
Yeah, Moss has been a top 27 fantasy running back in all 4 of his games this season. He's been top 32 in expected fantasy points. Like you said, he set the career high in snap rate last week. So he's definitely trending up. And this Tennessee defense is bad. So I like Moss this week. And even Singletary, I think, is in play as an RB3 or flex, because I still think he's going to be looking at 10 to 12 touches in this game.
Mm-hmm. On the Tennessee side, I think there's nothing really sneaky. A.J. Brown was only so-so in his return last week, but his 6 targets led the team in a game where Ryan Tannehill was just 14 of 22 passing. So there was really no chance for him to do anything in that one. It's not a good matchup for the passing game this week, but I think we both expect them to be trailing in what could be a high-scoring game.
Yeah, pass volume should definitely be up in this game, which is going to help A.J. Brown. Julio Jones looks like he's going to be back. He was on the practice field on Wednesday. But man, the Bills defense, by like any metric you look at, is the best defense in football. So it's definitely a tough spot for the Titans.
Anything else from this matchup?
Nope.
That's going to do it for this Week 6 preview edition of the podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now to see our full Week 6 rankings to help you finalize all of your lineup decisions. Check the My Teams page. You can get customized versions of our rankings to fit your specific league format. You can also find us anytime in the free DraftSharks Discord. Find the link to join in the description for this podcast, wherever you might be consuming it right now. For Jared Small and the rest of the DraftSharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.